All right, and we are live. Welcome everybody to Lubbock Compact Live for Wednesday, December 6th. I'm your host, Adam Hernandez, here with my co-host, Josh Shankles. And today we have two very special guests with us here on the show. And that is Christy Gimza and Peter Mulberger with the Freedom to Read Coalition. And today's topic is book banning efforts in Lubbock, Texas. So, what has been happening? What is the Freedom to Read Coalition about? And what have they been doing to counter some of these book banning efforts? And so that's what the topic of the show is today. As usual, if you have any questions or comments, you can put those down in the comments and we will see those and pass those along. And so should be a good show. This is an interesting one for sure. So Josh, without further ado, go ahead and kick us off.
Christy, Peter, thanks for being with us. You're good friends of ours. I'm wondering if you guys can take a moment and introduce yourselves to our audience. We'll go ladies first. Christy, jump in here.
I'm Christy Gimza. I'm a mom of two Lubbock ISD kids, have been pretty politically active, just kind of trying to get the community engaged more with what's going on with public schools, try to support teachers and students and keeping the focus on them. So, I've been involved that way. And then as this came about, met up with Peter and got to know him, and we started to work on this project here. When we started to see outside people coming in, trying to remove books from the school.
Perfect. Peter, tell us who you are.
Wow, that's easy to encapsulate, right?
Right.
I am currently a freelance data scientist living in Lubbock. My spouse is a professor at Tech. I used to be a professor of political science, and my area in political science was citizen engagement, and sort of citizen democracy, if you will. And so I had a citizen group going, and we found out that there were organizations moving into Lubbock that were interested in banning books. And we held a teach-in about book bans. And then we said, well, it would be great if we had a nonpartisan organization that could, house this effort to address book bans or organizations that are pursuing book bans. And I said, hey, I just happen to have a group that's a citizens group, and we can, make this part of our process, part of our activity. And so Lubbock Freedom to Read Coalition is a component of a larger organization that's about citizen engagement with the community.
Perfect. You took my next question off the table. So, tell us, set the stage for us about, give us a little bit of context here. How did this land in, who are behind the book banning efforts? How did this land in our city? What is the bigger framework that this all fits within?
That is actually am I on?
Yeah.
Okay, because the box didn't highlight with my image. Anyway, I was just going to say that's a pretty big topic. It's actually pretty complicated. I think there are people who are funding the book banning organizations, and we could start there, although that's a complicated story in and of itself. But we have reason to think, especially with this massive increase in book banning that took place in the United States between 21 and the current day. So you see, 20 years from 2000 to 2020 is, book recalls or bans pretty much flat. And then after that, the numbers start skyrocketing to 1,800, 2,500, and this year we expect even more. And that kind of, pattern suggests that there are some pretty big, deep pockets behind this. In fact, there's a lot of evidence that there are some very deep pockets behind it. The largest book banning organization in the country is Moms for Liberty, which landed in Lubbock in October. So they have two donors who are responsible for $1.5 million of their $2 million budget in this last year. And of the remaining $500,000, I wouldn't be surprised if it's only a handful of donors who are responsible for much of that as well. And so you go, who are these people? Why are they giving money to all this? And as far as we've been able to tell, and the evidence on this is a little bit unclear because the Supreme Court under Donald Trump in 2018 declared that 501c3 and 501c4 organizations do not have to report who is funding these kinds of organizations. And so what you have to do is look at where donors come out and explicitly say that they're donating or giving money, or where you can see that organizations are working with other organizations that are definitely being funded, where they have crossover of personnel. So you see one organization has top people who end up working for another organization, and the first organization belongs to a certain wealthy donor. More is the creation of and funded by a certain wealthy donor, and really it comes down to the Koch donor network as a lot of this. I mean, maybe not all, but from what we've been able to tell, Moms for Liberty works very closely with organizations like the Heritage Foundation, which is a Koch donor group. I mean, it's a group that's clearly funded by Koch, and then they share personnel. And what is a Koch donor network? Well, Charles Koch is a oil and gas and other things billionaire who has very far right politics. He has created this sort of shell game of donors where there are rich donors around the country, and they meet twice a year. They have 600 plus donors coming in each time, and each donor is required to put up at least $100,000 each year to belong to this organization. In 2016, Charles Koch said he would spend $900 million to influence the politics of the United States. That year, the Republican National Committee and the GOP spent about $660 million. So to give you an idea, this person is giving more money to influencing politics in the United States than the entire GOP. So it's pretty mind-boggling. And we know that for Liberty and other groups like True Texas Project, which is also in town, are being funded by people who are connected to Koch.
Okay, so we've got shadowy networks of donor class and difficult to parse out organizations kind of trying to create these sort of the shell game of who's behind what. Christy, get in on this. What's behind all this? How does this come down into Lubbock specifically?
Sure. Well, I think at first, and I'm not sure of the timeline, but True Texas Project has speakers come in every so often. And I think that's funded some by Dunn and Ferris Wilkes, Tim Dunn, who are big money out of Midland, who control a lot of the politics in Texas. They're kind of like the Kochs for Texas, So someone came in town to talk about dirty books and how to get them out. And so people attended that. They were suggesting stealing books from the public library, just using a lot of pejorative language and just really, painting librarians as pornography peddlers and calling teachers and librarians groomers, all the things, right? So that's, I think, what kicked off a little bit of this. So we kind of formed in response to that. But you did start to see people go up at the school board meetings. James Baxa, who is with the True Texas Project, who has 5 children who are homeschooled, so his kids are not in schools, Lubbock ISD. You had another woman to come speak who is also involved with True Texas Project, who lives out of town, come to speak. So that tells you, like, this is not local. This is not anybody who actually has kids in school. In fact, like after that, it looks like the Moms for Liberty kind of formed after that. There's not a lot of momentum with them either. And in fact, like I think there were 3 mothers who spoke who are very concerned about things, but their kids are in private school. Their kids aren't in Lubbock ISD. So it's pretty fascinating to me that they're going to make the effort to come and speak when their kids aren't in public schools, So that tells me a little bit. I haven't seen anybody come to speak that actually has kids in Lubbock ISD.
No, this is one of the things that I've sort of watched play out in different areas where it's I've always said it's fine for somebody to have beliefs. You've got some firm beliefs, and that's great for you, right? The issue comes in is when you try to force somebody to do or act as you would, right? Obviously, we don't want to condone anything that would hurt anybody. So as long as you're not hurting anybody, and feel however you want to feel, right? Hold whatever beliefs you want to hold. I just think that's where the issue comes in, is that they seem to be unable to leave others alone as they are, right? And so I that just makes me sort of feel like there's something else behind it, because like you said, they don't have children in the school, so it's not like their kid was at the school library and brought home some book they disapproved of or anything like that. Like, they're literally not in the schools. So I guess could either Peter or Christy, one of you, sort of talk about what do you, in your opinion, what do you feel like is the impetus for these folks who are behind these movements?
Christy, do you want to start?
I'll say a couple of things. One, I think it's different for different people. I think for somebody like James Baxa and the True Texas Project, it's political. Of course, they want vouchers. They want money to homeschool their kids. They want this. And it sows distrust with the school. So I think they're in there for that. The Moms for Liberty, I feel like people are manipulated. Parents are concerned about their kids and their safety, and I feel like they bought into this narrative. That's part of it. I think part of it is they have a fundamentalist, not a Christian worldview, but a fundamentalist Christian worldview, which is a very, not a majority of Christians, and they feel like it's theirs to impose on other people. So I think it's complicated.
To add to that, I looking at a wide variety of evidence on this, including the kinds of books that they're trying to remove around the country and in Texas, you get the distinct impression that really what they're up to is not really protecting children from pornography, in quotes, in the schools, but really trying to erase 60 years of social progress. So what they want to do is they want to turn America back to sort of a fantasy version of the 1950s, in which America was all happy and white and Christian and heterosexual and patriarchal. And the last element of that is that America is, one in which men exert dictatorial control over their families and their children, and then a few great men exert dictatorial control over society. And this is what they're trying to bring back. And just as a bit of evidence for this, let me give you some idea of the kinds of books that you see on Texas Representative Matt Strauss's books, 850 book list of books he wants banned. Just to give you a flavor for what it is that they are trying to do. They want to ban books about the horrors of dictatorship. So just dictatorship. Books about the mistakes made by ruling hierarchies. Books about rights, including the rights of citizens, teens, women, non-whites. books about the oppression of women, books about America's history with race and the current struggles of non-whites, books that have an even non-central character that is queer, books about growing up queer, books about sexuality, the human body, pregnancy, teen pregnancy, sexual education, books depicting catastrophes brought about by excessive human exploitation of nature, books critical of extreme forms of Christianity, books critical of white supremacy, books about sexual and physical abuse or assault. Now, if you add those things together and you say, okay, remove all those concepts and ideas from people's mind and all that history from people's mind, what you end up with is some kind of whitewashed version of the 1950s, one that's not realistic at all, but that's what you've got. And you're right to say that this doesn't really add up because think about this. Focusing on school books that are presumably pornographic makes very little sense when students can easily access the internet or their peers for truly caustic pornography that will warp their minds. And without school books to give kids a more positive view of things, that's removing protection from your children.
I wonder, Peter, sorry, real quick, Josh. I
Go ahead.
wonder, have you seen in any of your research, is this particular to a certain age group? Because why I ask is a lot of these, like you said, it's this sort of kind of rose-colored lens look at the 50s, right? Depending on where you sit politically, or maybe how you feel about other groups and things of that nature. And I just wonder, is it more so prevalent with an older group, or is this sort of like, is this covering all age groups that these people are coming from?
Well, let's put it like this. When our group went over to the school board meeting, the Board of Trustees meeting, we had a high school student speak, Christy's daughter, actually, so to be precise. But, that's what she wanted to do. I haven't seen, I don't think, too many people that look even sort of younger adult, in my mind, speaking on the other side.
Interesting.
Gotcha.
Yeah, no, and what I would emphasize here is that our organization is also a nonpartisan organization. We have an interesting construct to Lubbock Compact in that we have a 501c3, a traditional nonprofit side, where we take in donations and provide programming. Among that programming is making people aware of what it is that is going on in their city. And we have a 501c4 side, which is a political nonprofit, and that is the side by which we perform public advocacy. And we have repeatedly said on the show, but we would re-stress that our politics at Lubbock Compact is, what does the evidence support? That is where our politics lies. And so in this context, and of course, people have to be well informed in order to make choices amongst the many things that they can choose from. And so book banning and what's going on in our schools is of course a concern for our organization, because as you point out, Peter, as you start to remove the cited, critiqued, peer-reviewed sort of sources of information that young people can get access to, then you start to stave off their ability to make informed, critical choices in their society about themselves, about their bodies, about their families, and practically anything else. And so I'm really glad that you contextualize this, not so much in book titles, but in book concepts. And so I think that's really important for folks to keep in mind as they're considering this. And also something that we have repeatedly emphasized on our show is that people's, parents have a responsibility for their children, absolutely, and that's a sacred sort of connection that parents and kids have, but your children aren't your possession. You presumably didn't bring them into the world so that you can control and dictate every aspect of their lives. And also, there are children who are not fortunate enough to have great parents or any parents at all. And what are we as a society going to do to equip them as a member of that society? And so, I think these are really important points, Christy, Peter, Adam, that you're bringing up here about, what is the context and framework? What's the heart of why this is concerning here? Christy, Peter, whoever wants to take this. No, go ahead. Yeah, jump in.
The First Amendment is the foundation of our country, first
Absolutely.
of all. Second of all, if the whole point of education is to launch people into adulthood, and we want to prepare our kids for a 21st century and want them to be competitive in the world and critical thinkers, we want them to have access to a variety of library books, and not every book is appropriate for every kid. I mean, you can't just go by age, which is why parents, it's not a secret, should know, what their kids are reading. They can talk about it,
Right.
And the other thing is, none of these library books are assigned to class books. The most controversial ones have been memoir, and they've actually been experiences of kids in their lives, and you're going to ban it, which is crazy. I would think and kind of the way the policy is written, it's good as far as, they look at the way the librarians choose the books. That's part of our teaching. We talked about like what that process is. So, the librarians are looking for books for a wide variety of kids, and people are concerned about mature content. Unfortunately, our kids are living mature content with a high suicide rate, with substance use, with sexual abuse, with it being at Lubbock a high area for physical abuse. And sometimes these kind of books can illuminate that for these kids to know, like, okay, this is not right, so it can actually have a protective effect. These books with hard topics. Yeah,
this is something. So I've talked about this maybe before on the show. I know I've talked about this with other people around the community at different points, but just from my own experience, I in my early ages, I dealt with child abuse, which is a very prevalent thing here in Lubbock, Texas. In the actual place where we live, we have a really big problem with child abuse. All right. I was one of those kids living under that condition. And simultaneously, I was also a brown kid in a mostly white school, which was Rush Elementary. And that experience mixed with the experience of my white grandmother taking me to a Protestant church where a lot of folks just very frankly were pretty racist. So from those experiences, I remember finding myself in the library from time to time at Rush Elementary, and my literal first hero in life is Harriet Tubman. And the reason why Harriet Tubman was my very first hero in life was because already at that point, so my grandmother, who was racist, and her husband, who was also a white man, he was a Texas Tech police officer. He was also very racist, but he was also an alcoholic. And so when he would leave Texas Tech, working his job, he would go and drink at the bar and get very drunk, and he would come home and he would either beat us or he would beat his wife. And so I saw firsthand sort of the subjugation of a woman to a man, also the subjugation of one race to another in a very real way. And so I identified with Harriet Tubman with some of the things she had been through. Of course, I can't identify with her level, her intensity of things that she went through as a Black woman in those times. I couldn't imagine that part, but I did identify with her in some way. And the fact that she was a woman who did the things she did, right? It was just, all of it was empowering to me. And so, it's something that I really identified with. And so here in Lubbock, our kids are going through so much. And by the way, that's if you just happen to be a straight person, and if you just happen to be a Christian at the same time, you probably have the best experience out of anybody in our city. That's just how it is. But if you happen to be a member of the LGBTQ plus community, if you happen to be a member of some racial group that's outside of just plain white, then you probably have a whole different experience. And as Josh pointed out, a lot of us, me included, didn't really grow up with a strong parental unit situation. And so when you're lacking those things, that's where you can. Now, the other thing that people need to understand, I spend a lot of time in LISD schools as a volunteer. And what I can tell you right now is that there's not kids lined up to go to the library. And then when you talk about a public library that's just out in the neighborhood, there's even less kids going to line up to be at that public library. So there's not huge hordes of kids going to grab up these books. But let's just say one of these kids ends up in a library because maybe they're a gay child, and they hear their parents constantly talking about how that's a sin, they're a groomer, something happened to them, all of these different things. In worst case scenario, they don't even think they exist. They think it's a choice to be gay or any member of the LGBTQ plus community. They think it's a choice, right? Who do they turn to? They can't turn to mom, they can't turn to dad because they're going to be disowned, right? They probably can't turn to a lot of their friends in school because they probably are learning the same thing from their parents. And so let's say they find themselves in a library and they find a book, God forbid, that has a character that actually they identify with. That can save that kid's life, literally. So are we more concerned with the child's life in a very real way, or are we more concerned with how we feel personally about a thing? And so I just wanted to put that in there because it's very important for people to understand this.
Well,
I'm
yeah,
sorry.
go ahead, Peter. What I want to get this one thing in there, which, I mean, it speaks to Adam's point, and then I'm going to turn it back over to you, Peter, which is that also, I mean, yes, that is true. Like finding representation of yourself and your own experience in a library, in a book, is very important. But also, books give us a fantastic window into somebody else's life and experience, and that is also very important. There's so many different things that I have, the closest experience that I will have of so many things, of so many places, of so many other people's experience, will be reading that in a book. And that's true for everybody else too. So, not to Adam's point about, of course, your life doesn't reflect exactly Harriet Tubman's. Nonetheless, knowing her experience was important for you to connect with. Peter?
Yeah, I think both you and Adam have really nicely put the point about why books are important, and especially books that present kids with the minds of others, the perspectives of others, and reflect their own identity, and help them work through things, and basically prepare them for adulthood, prepare them for being productive adults. And I think something very different is going on in the group of people who want to ban books. And as a bit of evidence for that, we have I was checking out a page by Lorelei Schaefer. She's one of the main book banning activists in Lubbock, or at least initially. And she had on her page a video that she was sharing with all of her friends, a video of Charlie Kirk, who's a propagandist for the Koch network-funded Turning Point USA. And he was speaking at a Lubbock megachurch, and he was basically claiming that there's this vast conspiracy between government schools, not public schools, but government schools, medical professionals, media, which include Disney and the internet, Marxists, and LGBTQ people to turn children against their parents and their parents' beliefs. And Kirk makes clear that the problem is children not being under the totalitarian control of their parents into their 20s, and even over matters about who and what the child is. So that includes their gender and sexual orientation. Anything that suggests that children can or should have minds of their own is a vast conspiracy against parental authority. Right. This is what we've been calling oppressive parenting, and it's really consistent with the notion of patriarchal authority. This idea that there's, the parents, and then, the father who's above the parents, who just decide everything, and it's a dictatorial control over your children. And I do understand that this is a parenting approach. There's a lot of research that shows that people who are less well off tend to parent like this, partly because they might not have the time or energy or resources to really sit down with their kids and try to understand what's going on with them and give them reasons and arguments and so on. And I understand, that for many people, this is what they reach for, but it is not something that's necessarily a good thing. In fact, I think it really isn't. Right. And so, this is the kind of mentality, this oppressive parenting that you see repeatedly brought up, I think, in these groups. And when they say that any reference to sexuality in a book, no matter how many awards that book has won, no matter what the author's reasons are for including some crass paragraphs, despite all that, it's pornography because we found a sentence somewhere that is crass. You're saying that kids can't handle that. That if they hear about LGBTQ, they'll suddenly become LGBTQ. Okay.
Right.
As an acquaintance of ours said, that's kind of like saying that a kid reading a book about a dinosaur can become a T-Rex. Right. It's not likely to happen.
Before we move on,
sorry. Yeah.
No, go.
No, I really wanted to sort of emphasize some of these ideas here, because what I think a lot of people miss a lot of times, and it's really easy to do, but as we grow older, we remember how we came up. We remember what we dealt with, or the things that we were taught, that maybe we don't even necessarily live those things. We just remember those things that we were taught. And so as we grow older and become less risk takers and things of this nature, and we have kids and we want the best for our kids, we try to go off of what we can pull from, right? But what people, I think, a lot of time miss is, and again, this comes directly from me working now for 3 years in schools and seeing just successive rounds of kids come through a place, and watching how they interact with the world, what they already know, what they're talking about. What people miss a lot of times is that the culture changes. The culture overall changes. And where things have been, not where they're going. Because a lot of these groups like to talk about, oh, well, where the country is going or all of these sorts of things, right? It's been here. And what I'm talking about is the modern times where kids are growing up with the internet. And I do have a little breaking news for folks who maybe want to stick their head in the sand. If you think that by 6th grade, because I work with 6th, 7th, and 8th grade kids on a regular basis every week, if you think that by the 6th grade that they haven't seen porn and they haven't talked about these very adult things, you're out of your mind. That's as plain as I can put it. You're out of your mind. And it just goes from there. We've got 8th grade boys who are catcalling and making inappropriate comments when the teacher bends over. All right. These are the kids who are in our community. So it's not some foreign country. It's not some, whatever you want to call it, other state. It's not Austin, Texas. It's Lubbock, Texas. And so I just want to break that to people because of the next thing I'm going to say. We have to deal in the reality of what we live in. And the other thing that people miss a lot of times as cultures shift and as time moves on is they find it really hard to accept that we can have the wrong idea. At one point in this country, we thought it was the right idea collectively, not me, but collectively as a country. They made the decision that slavery was okay. I don't know a whole lot of people, there's some out there for sure, but I don't know a whole lot of people who would agree with that today in 2023. I don't care who you are. So some of these ideas we had in the 50s where the man ruled everything, and if the woman got out of line, you could slap her around a little bit, and all of those things. That was the wrong idea. And we also forget, for those who don't know history, I'm going to give you a little lesson right now. The 50s was not that far removed from when women got the right to vote. And it was before the time when women could get a credit card in their name or a house in their name. Those were the wrong ideas, right? So we have to understand the times we're in. And the last thing I'll say is that we have to deal with it in a realistic way. And trying to shield your children from these sorts of things is more harmful than it is beneficial. One of the things that I always advocate for, and will continue to advocate for, is reality-based sex ed in our schools. We don't have it here in Texas. And that's causing us a lot of problems. We have it right here in Lubbock, Texas. I'm not talking about some foreign place. We have high rates of teen pregnancies. We have high rates of STIs. Christy knows this very well.
Yeah.
And that's what's happening because we're not talking about these things, not only in a real way, we're not talking about them at all. A lot of these young girls don't even know that when they start their period, they can get pregnant because they're not even having these conversations with their own mothers. The other thing, last thing I'll say about this, the other reality of our situation, and it's been this for a while, all of that patriarchal stuff, okay, great, cool idea. What about the fact that there's a lot of women in our community who don't have the father who fathered those children around? We have to understand that the dynamics have changed. We now recognize that gay people exist, and sometimes they're a couple, and that sometimes they're raising children. What about that? There's healthy ways to go about this. We have to understand when we have the wrong idea. So I just wanted to really drive that home.
I'm
Yeah,
going to just
before-
say a quote.
I was
think
just about to go to you, Christy. Go.
Yeah, just thinking about with diversity of books and why that's important. This is from, I think, Professor Dr. Bishop. When there are enough books available that can act both as both mirrors and windows for all our children, they will see we can celebrate both our differences and our similarities. And things have changed and the culture has changed, but I think our values, like we want to have community. We want kids to feel at home at school and have connections with other kids that are different from them or the same as them. So we all want that, I think, and I think you're right. I wish kids would read books more, I wish they weren't tested all the time on reading and they had more freedom to pick what they want to read, because I think in ways like all this testing and everything has interfered with the joy of learning, you know. But I think it's really important that we keep that available, and we prepare our kids to be adults with the world around them. As far as the sex ed thing, I would go further and say not a reality-based sex ed, but like evidence-based sex ed. If we're going to talk about like what works, because what we're doing now compared to the rest of Texas and compared to the country, we are doing very poorly in STIs and on teen pregnancy compared to the rest of the country and compared to Texas.
Yeah,
And
no,
there
that's
was a
great context.
conversation I had with Rocky Malloy at one point. He's one of the people who's trying to get chaplains, specifically sort of evangelical Christian Oral Roberts University trained chaplains into the public schools around Texas, which the legislature opened the loophole for. And he was saying, well, how are you going to address, without, school chaplains, how are you going to address, teen pregnancy and, sexually transmitted diseases and teen suicides and so on and so forth? And, the fact is, he says he's got a lot of evidence that school chaplains helps with this stuff. I asked him for that evidence. I still have yet to see it. And there, I'm pretty well trained in analyzing evidence. If the evidence says, yeah, school chaplains solves all that, I'll be the first to come out and say, hey, that's what the evidence says. But the reality is I haven't seen it. I've heard some statistics he's thrown around, but don't understand the context for them, how the data were collected, whether it was a properly done study or not a properly done study, and so on. And so, a lot of these folks think that the solution to everything is just more Christianity, more, Bible Belt stuff. And if you look on a map across the US, it's the Bible Belt that has the highest levels of STIs. At least two of the three major forms of STI.
Right.
And so it's I think that there can be such a thing as protecting your child too much from the realities of life to the point where they're not able to make good decisions. And
hey, everybody, their preachers' kids have a reputation for a reason.
Hey, we've all heard. I came from a small town. We've all heard it. Christy, Peter, I mean, we're running short on time here. I know there's so many more things that we can talk about, but I think this has been an important discussion. Maybe you could help folks understand how they might support your work or get involved with this, or what are some of the best practices and approaches for parents out there to look at this? Peter, we'll start with you.
Okay. I think, the easiest thing for a person to do is to join a group and participate and give some of their time and their effort. And we have such a group, the Lubbock Freedom to Read Coalition. You can find it on Facebook. I'll send you a URL. Sometimes people have trouble finding it for some reason, but I'll send you a URL that you can put up with this video. And there are two pages. There's the page for the Lubbock Freedom to Read Coalition, which is open access, public facing. You can just take a look at some of the comments there and ideas, and some of the videos. There's some interesting videos that I think a lot of people could afford to use to look at. There's also references to places where kids can find these censored books online. So there are organizations that try to make them available to kids. And if you think that the page looks interesting, then join the group. There's a Facebook group called the Lubbock Freedom to Read group, which is a private group, so you'll have to ask to get in. But we'll bring you in. And there you can sign up for an action group. which is a group. We have these different groups, like a research group, a group that goes out and interacts with the community, a group for trying to get school board candidates who are moderate, not extreme, and so on. And so I think that one of the easiest and most effective ways that people can get involved is by participating like that.
Of course. Yeah. Christy?
Oh, you're muted, Christy.
Okay. Yeah, paying attention to school board meetings, what's going on. You can keep up to date with the page. There has not been movement either way really on this issue with Lubbock ISD. The trustees are not really gonna, I don't think anybody's ready to change anything, which is good. We would like some clarity on their policy, because they did a presentation on reconsideration committee and what their process is with the librarians. And they say they're going to have 7 people. So if somebody says, I don't want this book in the school for anybody, there's a committee that gets formed, and they said 7 people will be on it. Well, their policy really only says 1 person who does curriculum, and then it may include other people. It never requires a certain number of people. So there's concern about that being abused. Either way, it needs to be a transparent process. It needs to be a set process. And if it's not in writing, then you can't hold people accountable. So I think that would be one thing. But overall, there's not, this is a small minority of people. There's not a taste for that here in Lubbock. I would just say, if you're supportive of letting librarians choose, using policies, then let your school board folks know, because if you're quiet, then people will come and just roll over. And so the other thing is just make sure there's some school board elections coming up that we're going to ask about these questions about being supportive about the freedom to read and keeping access for kids for the reading material that they can choose.
Yeah, absolutely. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure in this case, and that's the phase that we're in. Peter?
Yeah, I just wanted to add something to that, which is there's also, although we do think that the Board of Trustees is moderate here, we have seen around the state moderate boards suddenly, in the face of people coming to the trustees meetings and reading pornographic, as it were, passages from various books, suddenly changing their minds and deciding that they're going to change the definition of what is an inappropriate group or a book in such a way that it's very easy to ban books. And that has recently happened in Plano, Texas, and I know it's happened in other places as well, where a moderate school board just suddenly said, okay, we're changing the definitions, and suddenly books that were accepted by reconsideration committees were banned. So I don't think we want to rest easy on the idea that, well, things are going to work out because our school board is moderate. We do need to still provide some degree of pressure and let the school board know what the majority of the public wants, not necessarily what a small minority does.
Yeah, perfect. Final thoughts? Anybody got anything else that we've missed that they need to close it down with? Adam, Peter, Kim, the floor is y'all's.
Christy, you mean?
Yeah, Christy.
Yeah. No, I don't have anything. We do have some city updates, right, Josh? Are we gonna get to those?
Yeah, no, we definitely do. Yeah.
Okay, well, if there's nothing else, Christy, Peter, you are more than welcome to hang around, or you're more than welcome to hop off if you want. But either way,
let me just send off this message here that has the URLs.
Yes, Kim has put those down in the comments for everybody, so they're down there in the comments of the video. If you want to go and check out the Freedom to Read Coalition page and the group, both of those links are in the comment section. So thanks, Peter.
All right, thanks.
Thanks, Peter.
I'll listen in some.
Cool.
Okay. Yeah, no, we can check through these very quickly. Like we said, the end of the year is slowing down. First thing that we wanted to make sure people know is that this week's city council meeting included a vote to put Freedom Act on the May ballot. This was sort of a pro forma, which is, just when the city council or any other government body is kind of just conducting through their business. And so that vote was held this Tuesday. We thank Anne for speaking at that meeting, and now it is officially a done deal. So you'll see that on the May local ballot. Adam, anything there?
No, I just yeah, good news.
Proceed. Okay. Also, folks who have been watching and following our work for a while know that the second meeting of the Amortization and Strategic Downzoning Committee happened this week. We were in attendance there along with our friends and partners from the North and East Lubbock Coalition. And maybe we'll get a little bit of time to go into this in a little more depth next week. The committee is, doing their homework and gathering up things. We thank them for their time, and we want people to know that their next meeting is going to be December 18th from 2 to 3 p.m. And one thing of note there is that we did ask that that the committee publish their meeting schedule a little bit faster than the required minimum, and that they try to select some meeting times that were more divert, some in the morning, some in the afternoon, and maybe also conduct a public hearing on this matter. So we're keeping our eye on this, and we'll let people know how they can continue to join these meetings, access it, get information in front of the committee, and speak to that if they so choose. The next one is, it's sad, it's unfortunate to talk about, but it harkens back to something we have discussed before on the show. We saw a little bit earlier this week that a 14-year-old young man lost his life from a gun accident this week, named Zadarian Valdez.
Zadrian is his name.
Zadrian, yeah, sorry. My reading here is not, my reading and naming is not going well. Zadrian Valdez. And while we don't know all the details of this specific event, what we do know is that the firearm that he lost his life to was stolen by him and his peers out of a vehicle. This is something that has come up on the show several times. LPD has been hitting this issue for a long while, that many firearm accidents and deaths, particularly those with young people, are the result of a stolen firearm out of a vehicle. It's a terrible loss, a terrible tragedy, and we just want to remind people that they need to be securing those guns and making sure that they're not able to easily make their way onto the streets to menace anybody or the people who are carrying them. Adam?
Yeah, I mean, I've said it many times before. I'll say it again. If you're going to be a gun owner, specifically in Lubbock, Texas, and you're going to carry that in your vehicle, the least you could do for your community to help with this problem, because I know it's a lot of gun owners, every time there's a news story, every time there's something, even somebody sneezes the word gun, they want to go in there and talk about all of their rights and this, that, and the third. And that's great. That's fine. But when you talk about all of the crime that's happening at the same time out of the other side of your mouth, you're contributing to that when you leave the gun in the vehicle with the vehicle unlocked. We've said this many times on this show. LPD has talked about this many times. Literally what's happening is these kids are going car to car to car, checking door handles until one pops open. They're looking for one of two things only ever: money and guns. And so if you want to really help the crime go down in terms of shootings with young kids, and you're a gun owner, then the least you can do, the easiest thing you can do to have an impact on your neighborhood, is really take the gun inside at night and lock it up. But if you just have to leave it in your car, lock the freaking car. So right. That's all I got to say about that.
No, and now we'll lighten it up again, not too much going on in City Hall with our city council, but I thought this was interesting. This was cool. This week they voted on a zoning change for a business that is getting ready to launch here in Lubbock, and it's a cat cafe, and what this is a side-by-side animal shelter, completely walled off and set up, side-by-side cafe and animal shelter that's going to specialize in cats. The business, the entrepreneurs who are starting it have seen this in other cities. My husband just went to one of these in Little Rock, Arkansas. But basically, it's a kind of a model meant to, allow animal lovers to interact with that and get more animals off the streets. All that they'll only be keeping, I think it's like 15 cats at a time, all up for adoption, spayed and neutered, ready to go. Also inviting people to come and interact with that. They made specific note of like a lot of college kids are living away from home, living in the dorms, don't have their animals there with them. So this is a great way for people to who are animal lovers to enjoy their time and have a nice coffee, have a nice snack. I just thought it was a cool thing to run across the city council's dais, and I was glad they voted on the zoning change. And then the last bit of City Hall news, late breaking news this afternoon. Mayor Trey Payne announced that he will not be running for re-election next year. Can't say that I'm going to be crying about that too much, but thank you for your service. And adios, muchacho.
Presented without comment. That's it.
Okay, and then last little bits here. We just want to remind folks that there are a couple of open surveys that are floating around out there that we're still asking people to take part in. The active transportation survey, the deadline was extended on this. And, James, our coordinator for transportation, James McKay, was on the show to talk about this. We've been promoting this on our social media page and public forum, but we would still encourage people to take the active transportation survey since they have opened that up for an extended period. And also, Texas has a broadband access and reliability survey that they're encouraging folks to take. Internet is becoming an essential and vital utility for everybody. And so we have the links for both of those posted. We would encourage people to take these quick surveys. This is, one of those ways that, as Adam put it so well, is the ways that we get the things that we need in our community and that we see that everybody's voice and perspective is represented. So if you'll do us the favor and take those surveys, we've posted the links for them, and that will be a great benefit. And that's all I got for tonight, man. How about you?
That's it. Yeah. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Thanks Peter and Christy for the Freedom to Read Coalition and all of their work that they're doing. And just keep educating the community out there, and we'll keep helping you out. So thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you here next time. Good night.
All right.